Hello, my name is Fernando Racinos. I'm going to be a sophomore at Kennedy Catholic High School, and I'm also a Skyway native, and I am part of the SYNC Youth Leadership Council. I'm going to be presenting year one. So this was the first year of our Youth Leadership Council, 2018-2019. There were 7 of us in our group. And at first, we wanted to team bond, and we wanted to get closer as a group. And after we did that, we wanted to decide what our mission was. And what we decided was we were going to advocate for youth voices in Skyway. And after we figured out what we wanted to do, what our mission was, we wanted to figure out what we should be advocating for. So we decided to come up with a research question that we could ask to the Skyway youth in our community. And we needed to learn different ways to gather this information. So we learned about different methods of gathering data, and we wanted to learn what was the scope of the data that we were gathering. And what we chose were focus groups and surveys, particularly paper surveys and online surveys. Mainly, we wanted to use online surveys, but we noticed that maybe some people didn't have access to a computer or internet, so we wanted to make it available to those who didn't have that. We wanted to gather as much data as we could, so we wanted to make it accessible to everyone. We distributed the link, and we also distributed the paper surveys everywhere we could. We partnered with the Skyway Water and Sewer to give some surveys in their water bills, and we also dropped off some surveys at the apartment complexes. We also ran focus groups with nonprofits and other Skyway based organizations. And our findings were very, very surprising to me. What we asked in our surveys is for the surveyee to rank their priorities. We gave them 5 priorities that we thought were very important, and we wanted them to rank them from first priorities all the way to their 5th priority. And the priorities that we gave them were a real investment in Skyway youth, improved public transportation, early education opportunities, affordable housing for Skyway natives, and places for community to gather. And our findings were very surprising to me. The first priority that most people in Skyway youth had were affordable housing, which was very surprising to me. But close second was investment in youth. And we decided that affordable housing is what we were going to be focusing on in year 2 and for years on. 2 quotes that we came across that were very impactful to me were: housing is a big problem. People can't afford to live where they live, which touches on the basis of gentrification and displacement, which is a very real problem in Skyway. And a second quote that we found was, what you put into youth now is what you will get out of the future, which touches the basis of investment in youth.
Okay, so using what we found in our first year as a launching point, we transitioned to the second year of the Leadership Council. Mackie, if you want to change the slide. So this is just a picture of one of our team bondings that we did earlier on in the process. So this was just one of our Christmas celebrations, and then some special opportunities that we've had on top of the expert conversations that we've had with people who are working in different capacities that all relate to the issues that Fernando brought up that the youth in our community really care about. There's some other special events and opportunities that we were able to take part in. So in the picture here, you see some of our leadership members at the Heal the Hood Community Rally March that happened just about a month ago. We've also been able to travel to Olympia with Stand for Children to do an advocacy day at the state capitol. And recently, we've also been able to give public testimony at a King County Council meeting. And then we also sat in one of the King County budget meetings recently as well. Now I'll pass it off to Jordan.
Throughout the year, we have met with different groups, activists, designers, and experts when it comes to affordable housing and advocating for different issues in communities. And the first group we spoke to were activists who used different resources and organizing steps to focalize on specific issues. Next slide. They talked about how it's very important to build power in our community and learning how to challenge the different places that hold a lot of wealth in each other. Planting our seeds to help make the change for the better. One of the activists, Reagan, spoke on the fact that we must take care of ourselves because we can't do it all.
So then the second group that we were able to have expert conversations with were designers and architects. You can see their names on the slide here. And these people work in innovative ways, including co-housing and designing new spaces and new construction areas. But what we heard from takeaways that we took away from this conversation was that affordable housing, the term, doesn't necessarily have a single definition. And this is also incredibly important, keeping in mind that Skyway is under the King County unincorporated umbrella. So our definition of affordable housing isn't necessarily what's actually affordable to our residents, because King County's median income, which is what the affordable housing is based on, is really skewed by like the top 1% of our residents. And we also heard a lot about how environmental justice and affordable housing are really coexistent, and they really feed into one another, because communities of color are also much more likely to experience environmental pollution that not only negatively impacts the value of their properties and their land, but also impacts the health of our residents. So we talked a lot about stigmas around affordable housing, how affordable housing is often thought to be like undesirable, so like run down, old, which it really isn't the case at all, and that affordable housing can really be an opportunity to use more energy friendly resources and environmentally friendly building materials. So we really appreciated how in this conversation they highlighted that they worked very closely with the community to plan future construction and with the developers to make sure that the buildings that are being put in the community are actually benefiting the community as a whole.
The opportunity to speak with were public policy experts. Their names are listed here on the slide. And public policy is a way for elected officials to listen and represent the public. Sorry. That the community believes that public policy should be driven and led by community members, and that officials are elected into office to represent the public, and they can only do that if they are talking and listening to the public. When it comes to who studies public policy, technically everybody, we are all learning from one another and developing principles of our own. We then come together as a community and decide on social laws that everybody agrees on. And for when it comes to impacting the public policy in Skyway, the first layer of government that the community will contact is the county. From there, the county representatives will then work with the state and federal representatives to represent their constituents and just come to an overall agreement.
And then the fourth group of people that we talked to, we called the session Models and Solutions. And these individuals come from a bunch of different backgrounds, but they all kind of communicated the point to us that we have to take ownership of the investments that are made in our community and kind of make sure that we use them for our advantage. So some of the key takeaways from this conversation were that when talking to developers, we need to we need to keep in mind that it's okay to negotiate with them to make sure that we reach compromises that not only benefit the organizations that are coming in to develop our communities, but also the members of the community as well. And we need to be able to figure out what resources are available to us now before developers move in, because this process of gentrification is obviously just going to keep moving and just going to keep progressing, because as more people move into the downtown Seattle area and more people begin to move outward as a result of that, Skyway is really going to be next in line for this process of gentrification. So some things that we also found notable were that these individuals they found that it was important to be able to reach out to people and not only help them understand that they have power and they have stake and they have ownership of this community, but also creating opportunities for them to buy housing and stay in the area. And then we also talked a bit about funding and where the funding comes from when we're talking about new developments in the area, and making sure that the funding that is available is being pooled to affordable housing specifically.
Final discussion with experts revolved around the topic of COVID-19 housing and what is happening during this pandemic and how it is affecting the people of our community. Did legislators focus from working with those affected by housing injustice to just maintaining what has already been fought for? During this crisis, homelessness is getting even more urgent, and some of our key takeaways is that housing insecurity and COVID-19 are disproportionately affecting the same communities, low-income communities, and Black, Indigenous people of color. They also a large impact of budget constraints, and affordable housing is a way to prevent wealthy white landlords from profiting off the working class Black, Indigenous people of color.
So with all of the conversations that we had and all of the input that we got from the people that we spoke to, we kind of had a large list of legislatures and different initiatives that we talked through and that we negotiated back and forth with, but we ended up deciding the 5 pieces of legislature that we most felt strongly about and that we believe that will impact our community in the strongest ways. So those 5 are a community benefits agreement, revising the definition of affordable housing, establishing a community center in the Skyway community, rent control, and then designating public land for affordable housing.
We agreed to advocate for is a community benefits agreement, and basically states that developers must obtain community approval of their plans prior to building. This could be expanded to address other community issues beyond income and housing inequality, and it would require an effective communication strategy to engage the community, but historically that has been difficult.
The second legislature that we want to advocate for is changing the definition of what affordable housing is. So we believe that affordable housing should be defined as 35% of the federal poverty line. And we touched on this a bit earlier, but because Skyway is under King County's jurisdiction, the very, very wealthy minority, like the top 1% of King County residents, skew the definition of what's affordable housing in our area. And because of that, the housing in our area that is labeled as affordable housing really isn't affordable enough to our residents. And so because of that, to have housing prices that long-term Skyway residents can afford, they need to be made so that residents who have the least and make the least are still able to stay in our community.
Is to establish and run a community center in Skyway, because currently we do not have any major community gathering space for education, recreation, community building, or just to go out and meet new people. A community center would be able to host after-school programs for children, addressing the school-to-prison pipeline and inequities in access to post-secondary education and academic counseling. It would also host community events and rentals for private events, bringing in income to further benefit the community of Skyway.
Another piece of legislature that we wanted to advocate for was rent control. So this is specifically limiting the amount that landlords can demand or increase over time, which will stabilize rent prices and allow Skyway residents to stay in their homes. So as we've seen just in the past couple of years even, the wages and the amount of money that people make don't parallel the increases to the rising housing costs in Skyway. And so families who have been here for years and years and years, they found that they aren't able to afford staying in the area. And obviously this is tied in with gentrification as well. So they aren't making enough to be able to stay in these communities and stay as part of these communities when the rising rent costs are continuing to rise. So this is also especially important given the current situation that we're all in with COVID-19, with families not being able to pay rent and with job insecurity. The policy like rent control would be able to protect them from rising rent costs as we transition through the pandemic and even out of the pandemic whenever that comes. But yeah, so rent control would just be able to provide a sense of stability for these families and to make sure that they aren't just going to be forced to pay more and more to be able to stay a part of these communities.
Piece of legislation that we chose to advocate for is designating public land for affordable housing. Because this states that land owned by either King County or Washington State should be given to nonprofit organizations and be made into affordable housing land. Right now, large amounts of land goes unused and sits idle. Meanwhile, many people throughout our community are struggling to find housing and end up homeless. And requires a partnership with King County and Washington State is to work with different nonprofit organizations and just on different pieces of land that could be used for affordable housing.